In Suriname, the government imposed a curfew in the capital to curb demonstrations against the high cost of living and cuts in social investment. In Turkey, the death toll after the devastating 7.8 earthquake surpassed 40,000. According to authorities, rescue operations will conclude on Sunday. And in Ethiopia, the 36th Ordinary Summit of Heads of States and Government of the African Union opened with calls for continental economic integration. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The government of Suriname imposed a curfew in the capital Paramaribo to try to prevent popular demonstrations in rejection of the high cost of living. The measure, which remained in force until 6 a.m. local time, came after a group of demonstrators stormed the parliament building, demanding President Johnson Toki's resignation and denouncing an increase in living costs in the country. These demonstrations were repressed by police, leaving a preliminary toll of 2 injured. Demonstrations began after Santoki's government insisted on cutting social investment as part of an economic restructuring program with the International Monetary Fund, which includes fiscal reforms such as subsidies elimination for electricity, water, and gasoline. The Caribbean community called on Saturday for a greater leadership role in addressing current deteriorating situation in Haiti. In an official report, the institution stated it needs to take decisive action as soon as possible to address the growing insecurity and its widespread impact in all sectors of Haitian life. The headlines also agreed to participate in another conference with Haitian authorities in that country for helping in the development of a plan to restore security and the rule of law. At the conference, regional leaders stressed that the political agreement adopted on December 21, 2022 must be followed in order to achieve a so-called national consensus in Haiti towards an inclusive transition and transparent elections. In Argentina, health authorities detected the second case of avian influenza in the province of Córdoba. The National Service of Agricultural Health and Food Quality confirmed a second case of avian influenza in 2 wild ducks found dead at Las Mojarras lagoon in the province of Córdoba. The first case of the virus in the country came from a wild bird found in the province of Jujuy. The agency declared a state of preventive health alert against the disease and increased surveillance efforts in the country. On February 8th, the World Health Organization issued an official communique about the spread of this disease in mammals in different regions of the world. In the United States, the 5 police officers accused of murdering a young man of African descent, Tyrone Nichols, pleaded not guilty before a jury in the city of Memphis. The officers appeared before a jury after being charged with murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, professional misconduct, and abuse of authority. The defendants pleaded not guilty despite the fact that videos of the arrest were made public and aired on the country's most important networks. During the hearing, Judge James Jones asked the public for patience while scheduling the next hearing for the defendants for May 1st of this year. This case of violence is reminiscent of what happened in May 2020 when a police officer killed George Floyd, sparking demonstrations against racism and police violence in the country. With the so-called March of Sacrifice, the people of Peru renewed this Saturday the demonstrations demanding Dina Boluarte's resignation as president-designate, early elections, and a constituent process. After a week of calm, several social organizations agreed to renew the protest this Saturday, February 18th, and several groups have already confirmed their participation. The March of Sacrifice consists of traveling through 3 districts of the region for approximately 4 hours. Gathering sites will be the Workers' Park in the city of Chiclayo at 2 p.m. local time, and later move to the town of Moshumi in the province of Lambayeque, where the march will start walking through its main streets. Then they will go to Tucumé jurisdiction and will end in Ilimo. The goal of the march is to decentralize the struggling actions taking place in the north of the country. Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at TeleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Germany, Chinese diplomat Wang Yi said his country will continue to make efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine. Wang Yi made a statement during his speech at the Security Conference in Munich. At the session, Wang asked the European countries to calmly seek a solution to the conflict between Moscow and Kiev. He also assured that China will present a document with its position on the political solution to this war situation to the director of the Foreign Affairs Office of the Chinese Communist Party. He added that Beijing is opposed to nuclear wars or attacks on nuclear facilities under the pretext of avoiding alleged catastrophes. At the same time, he recalled that since the beginning of the Russian special operation, his country has been promoting a peaceful solution. Also in Germany, at the Munich Security Conference, Ukraine's allies called for intensifying aid to Kiev. During the Munich conference, Kiev's Western allies called on them to give Ukraine the help it needs in its conflict against Russia. Likewise, Jens Stoltenberg, chairman of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, called for more military support to Kiev, saying that this is the only way to stop Russia's advances and defend Ukrainian sovereignty. Previously, Emmanuel Macron, president of France, stated that they must prepare for a long-term conflict. Moscow has denounced on repeated occasions that Western countries are promoting the conflict between Kiev and Moscow. In Turkey, authorities report that search and rescue operations following the earthquake that shook the country more than a week ago conclude this Sunday, February 19th. According to the country's Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, the worst damage was recorded in the province of Hatay, and the Turkish cities of Kahramanmaraş and Adıyaman. Authorities also say that today the death toll in the country stands at over 40,600, while the number of injured people stands at 108,068. Although rescue operations conclude this Sunday, the state of emergency decree issued by the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan continues to be enforced in 10 provinces affected by the earthquakes. In Turkey, at least 3 people were rescued alive on Saturday, 296 hours after strong earthquake struck the country. According to local media, as part of search and rescue efforts, a Kyrgyz team managed to save a couple and their 12-year-old son, who were trapped under rubble of the apartment building where they lived. Shortly after the rescue, the child was reported dead, while both adults were hospitalized with multiple injuries. The bodies of 2 other children were also found in the same place. According to local media reports, the latter are not Turkish nationals, and although their nationality has not been disclosed based on their names, they might be Syrian. In this context, the search teams have uncovered the body of Ghana international football player Christian Atsu. Atsu had been missing following the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria. The remains of the football star, who had been playing for Turkish Super League club Hatayspor, were found amid the ruins of a luxury 12-story building where he had been living in the heart city of Antakya. Reports a day after the quake struck had said that Atsu was pulled alive from under the rubble and taken to the hospital for treatment. However, Hatayspor announced a day later that Atsu and the club's sporting director were still missing. The earthquake that hit Syria, in addition to death and injury of thousands of people, caused material losses exceeding $5 billion, a high cost that further aggravates the plight of the Syrian people as a result of war and blockade. From Aleppo, our correspondent Hisham Wanus expands on the details.
Sitting on the street near a campfire to protect himself from the winter cold after having lost his home in the Bustam al-Sahir neighborhood in the city of Aleppo, old Adel sadly watches his neighbors, survivors of a building that collapsed in the earthquake, as they search through the rubble of their homes for the remains of their destroyed possessions, items, objects, and personal documents. A painful image that, besides the attachment of these affected families to their memories, reflects the difficult situation they live in, not only because of the effects of the earthquake, but also because of the acute need that has been accompanied by more than a decade of war and blockade.
It is very tragic and very painful because we were fine, living in our homes, and suddenly we are on the street because our building collapsed. And as you can see, the residents of the building are looking through the rubble for their children's books that went to school, their personal belongings, and some of their belongings that could be of some use, because life must go on. The first impression has been strong, but now it is bigger, because as residents of this neighborhood, we are aware that we have lost everything. All the work of many years disappeared. 40 or 50 years of work to have a house. We have lost not only our homes, but also the goods, the tranquility and security.
Not far away, in the nearby Al-Masharaka neighborhood of Aleppo, old Amira, together with her son and three granddaughters, lives in her apartment, which lost its facade because of cracks and structural damage caused by the earthquake. Like her neighbors, she is demanding the lifting of the Western coercive measures and hopes that reconstruction will begin soon so that her life can return to its normal course.
During the tremor, we ran out to the street in the rain and cold. We went out with our clothes on. It was something incredible that I cannot explain. I only know our house is now severely damaged, as well as the whole building, but I cannot leave it. I don't want to be anywhere else but here. Thank God we're safe.
Hopefully, the government will guarantee temporary housing for these homeless families, and we are grateful that they are working on removing the rubble to start rebuilding. What you see here is but a sample of the great destruction the earthquake caused in the other suburbs and the neighborhoods of Aleppo.
Meanwhile, authorities evacuated hundreds of damaged buildings for demolition as part of an ongoing debris removal process in Aleppo and other provinces. This work paves the way for the rehabilitation and construction work that the country's authorities promised to carry out with the support of friendly countries, which have diligently offered a helping hand to the Syrian people in the face of this natural catastrophe. After 12 years of terrorist foreign-imposed war, the Syrian people are now suffering the repercussions of the earthquake. Yet they resist and choose to live, determined to move forward and restore the splendor of their country.
TeleSUR, Aleppo, Syria.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back From the South. On Saturday, the 36th Ordinary Summit of Heads of States and Government of the African Union opened in Ethiopia with calls for continental economic integration. During the opening speech at the summit taking place in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa, the Commission's Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat insisted on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that came into force in January 2021, with the aim of creating a trade zone capable of enhancing industrialization and trade in African countries. Mahamat also urged heads of government to have a better representation of Africa in global multilateral forums as a way of enabling the continent to make its own contribution to the world's problems. On the said agenda, the heads of government are expected to address the effects of the droughts that have affected millions of Africans, as well as a proposal on the security operations on the continent.
I have made clear the issue of sanctions imposed on member states following unconstitutional changes of government. Obviously, these sanctions do not seem to produce the desired results. On the contrary, I am deeply concerned about the recent increase in violence by armed groups in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and the rise of terrorist groups in the Sahel and elsewhere.
During a press conference on the silence of the 36th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, capital of Ethiopia, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced that the Central Emergency Response Fund will release $250 million to support some of the world's most vulnerable people, including those at risk of famine in the drought-stricken Horn of Africa.
Around the world today, 339 million people are in need of humanitarian aid, an increase of more than 25% since last year. And so today, here in Addis, I'm announcing the largest ever allocation from our United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund, $250 million, to combat famine and to address unfunded emergencies. These resources will support some of the most vulnerable people in some of the most forgotten crises around the world, including those at risk of famine in Africa. Around the world today, 339 million people are in need of humanitarian aid, an increase of more than 25% since last year. And so today,
Guterres also lamented the lack of African representation on the Security Council. The greatest injustice that exists today in the Security Council is the lack of at least one permanent African member, he said.
It is my deep belief that the biggest injustice that exists today in the Security Council is the lack of at least one African permanent member of the Security Council. When the Security Council was formed, there were very few African countries that were independent. So we have today a Security Council that corresponds to a reality that is no longer the reality of today's world.
The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, with a history of struggle against the brutal apartheid system of South Africa with more than 350,000 members, has launched an international solidarity campaign for the release of Mobia Abu Jamal, who has been in prison for the last 42 years.
The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, led by its General Secretary Ivan Jim, has made an appeal to the judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia County in the United States of America, Honorable Judge Lucretia Clemons, to consider releasing Mumia Abu Jamal from jail. We spoke to the General Secretary and this is what he had to say.
Well, today, as tomorrow start, from the 16th to the 16th of March, as the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, we're launching our international solidarity campaign in full support of the release of Mumia, who has been a political prisoner, a leader and a soldier of freedom and love of all people of the world, who has been wrongly kept in jail. And we're calling on the judges in the United States of America that in his appeal this time around, he should be released and be set free. There's absolutely no basis for him to be kept in prison. This is a campaign that we have waged over many, many years, separated by rivers and forests, with the people of the United States, who have taken a very solid line in saying Mumia must be released. This campaign will be a rolling campaign that we will embark upon towards the 16th, because we of the view that the judges should not do anything else except to set him free. And this is a demand to say he's a political prisoner who has been a victim of wrongful arrest. He must be released. Justice must be done, and we will not rest beyond the 16th to embark on an international campaign. And our message to the judges: do the noble thing. Make sure that justice prevails. Release Mumia. He deserves his freedom.
This militant Union of Metal Workers in South Africa has promised to mobilize all progressive workers and organizations to embark on a month-long solidarity campaign to have their comrade Mumia Abu Jamal released from prison. For TeleSUR English, I'm Clever Banganai reporting from Johannesburg, South Africa.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.